Hi, I'm Mark Corradetti, and you're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.
Hi everyone, John Liebman here. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com. We're coming to you today on location from the 2019 Winter NAMM Show, Anaheim, California, at the Tsunami Cables booth with our good friend, bassist extraordinaire Mark Corradetti. Hey, Mark.
Hey, John. How you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm terrific.
Good. I want to give the people a chance to learn about you because you've done a lot of work, a lot of playing, a lot of sessions, a lot of other things. So let's start from the beginning and tell us about your musical upbringing and how you became a bass player. You come from a musical family, parents, brothers and sisters, records playing, going to concerts, things like that, or, in that spirit, tell us about your musical upbringing.
Well, it's pretty simple. I come from a place called Summit, New Jersey. It was it's like a commuter town of New York City. My parents weren't very musically, inclined, but my mother was a little bit musically motivated, if that makes sense. So she had a lot of records around the house and that kind of thing, different types of music.
Such as?
Well, Beatles and, Broadway music, things like that. And, having close access to New York as a little kid, we were just really exposed to a lot of different things. Plus the school I went to, the school system had a great music program. It was just fantastic. I mean, they had, all sorts of things. So I was really brought up through that whole thing since like the fourth grade. I actually started out as a drummer in the concert band type.
And then you became a musician.
And then I decided to become a musician after a while when I was 14.
So how did you gravitate to the bass?
Well, there were some kids, it's almost like the typical story, everyone else played guitar or something else, and hey, we need a bass player. Hey, did you ever think about playing bass? So I said, yeah, I'd love to play. And I kind of knew what it was already, so I was like, yeah, I'll do it, but I'll even take it further. I'll make a commitment, Wow. So almost immediately I started taking lessons and things like that, got involved with the school jazz band and things like that, and had private lessons, had a really terrific teacher, and then, he got me into like reading music. I read really well and that type of thing, and just, I really got involved after that, and then it became like a disease, like it festered.
We understand.
Yeah, I know. It's just, it kind of festered. So then I decided I wanted to go to music school. And so I, applied and got into Berkeley and, went through 3 years of that and just had a fantastic time there. Great teachers, Whit Brown and Bruce Gertz, and I think they're still there.
They are. Bruce has been there over 40 years, and Whit maybe even longer than Bruce.
I believe so. I mean, those guys used to scare the snot out of me as a little kid. Blew me away. But it was a wonderful experience, and 30 years later, I'm starting to actually understand what they taught me and what, it's just, you don't always get it right away.
Play upright also?
I don't play any upright, no. No, I play fretted and fretless basses.
Okay. What about any musical bass heroes, bass influences? Who did you like when you were coming up as a bass player?
Well, I really like pop music. I was listening to anything that Carol Kay played on, and James Jamerson, the Beatles, Paul McCartney, all that kind of stuff. Philly music, because we were pretty close to that. Philly soul and Temptations and things like that. Motown, very, very much radio-oriented music until I hit about 16 or so, and then I heard Jocko, and then it kind of ended, it didn't, it really began, so, he got into that. I think the first record, I was working at a music store part-time, and some guy said, hey man, you want to hear Weather Report? I'm like, what's that, and he was like, well, it's Jocko, he revolutionized the bass, and I was like, awesome. So I really started to really enjoy that kind of music. And then it just grew, I just, from, pop music to jazz to free music, it's just, open ears.
How did your career get rolling, and what kinds of stuff were you doing when you started, playing the bass for money?
Well, in the beginning, I was married, so I kind of had to make a living, so I was doing a lot of, I think they call them casuals.
Yeah.
Out here. I was probably doing about 120 weddings a year. up in throughout the New York
I think
area.
in Boston they call it general business. In New York and Miami it's club dates. And yeah, out in California it's casuals.
Right, yeah, I think we call them club dates. I used to do a whole bunch of those. And I'll tell you, some of those guys are just amazing musicians. They know like every tune ever written in any key at any given time. So I was like, oh my God, that's how I really learned to play, get on with those guys. And boy, I'd go home some nights and I'd have my butt kicked, But although that's not what I do anymore, it was really cool. It was a really cool way to get. And then I used to work a lot of Persian gigs in Manhattan a lot.
Persian?
Yeah, Persian. Like I used to work like Thursday nights. I'd work some kind of a Hasidic thing in Brooklyn. Friday night was some kind of a Jewish wedding or a bar bat mitzvah.
It wouldn't have been Hasidic if it was on a Friday night.
Well, maybe that was Thursday night, but it was like Thursday through Sunday. I was always really busy. And then from that, I got to know other musicians and, did the occasional, demo session or, jingle date or something like that. And then from there, it's like, wow, this is really cool. I'd really like to do this more, but I didn't want to do that so much. So, I moved to Nashville and I was there for 22 years, until like 3 years ago. And there I did a lot of demo sessions and, independent projects and things. I kept busy. I had a really good run there. I still have a lot of great friends there. And then in 2015, Dan Glenn, you know Dan real well, right?
Dan with two N's, Glenn, yes.
Right,
Saw him this morning.
Right, so Dan Glenn encouraged me to come out to Los Angeles to play on a project. He was with a record label out here, and I got to get involved in all the different artists that worked for the label at the time. And so I moved out here,
out here meaning Los Angeles?
Southern California, up in the Santa Barbara area. Yeah, and then I sold my house in Franklin, Tennessee, and bought another place out here. So now we're here full time. So now I just go, between LA and Ventura and Santa Barbara, and and occasionally I take a trip to like Europe. I was in Europe in September with a jazz trumpet player, and that was a really cool trip. So and then I do a whole mess of online sessions now for all sorts of different types of music. So I'm busy with that almost every day. I'm really lucky,
Let's talk about your gear.
Okay.
Basses, strings, cables, pickups, effects, whatever.
Well, let's talk about the cables first. I use Tsunami cables because I really do like them. There's no noise, period. And that's really all I know about them. As far as basses, I've got several. I've played Steven Sukop basses for about 25 years, and I've never really wavered. A little bit, I've got a Ken Smith, a Fender Jazz, so I really have all the bases covered, no pun intended. Insofar as strings, I represent GHS. I really love their strings. They just last a long time, and I'm not really scientific about it. I couldn't tell you how they're wound and all that kind of stuff. So it's tone. I'm a tone guy. I use Avalon gear for amps. I use Epiphany for live stuff. In my home studio, I use Avalon gear and things like that, and that really covers me for a lot of different types of things.
What about the pickups in your bass?
Oh, that's the most important part. I'm sorry, Bartolini. I've always used Bartolini pickups, and they're just excellent. They came stocked in my Sukop basses. And I had my Fender, I had them put Bartolinis in that too. And they're great, just a nice classic sound, tone. It's all about tone.
What about the future, Mark? What else is coming up that you know of? Or maybe something that you've always wanted to do that you will do someday or would like to do someday?
Well, there's a lot of things. I'd like to keep going back to Europe and do more there. I'd like to continue doing more recording sessions. I'd like to build my recording business. I also have a strong interest in real estate too, and I'm licensed in a couple states, so I enjoy practicing that too. And I just want to keep growing, musically, and keep learning. The older I get, the more I kind of slow down. I'm really analytical and that type of thing. So, I find myself preparing for gigs nice and slow and right and methodical, more than just trying to play a lot of notes and things like that. I kind of like to hug the harmony. That's my approach.
Musical maturity.
Maybe that's it. When you get to be 30, it's you start to think like that.
Well, you've built a nice career as a bass player.
Yeah.
What would you be if you weren't a bass player, if you can imagine, something outside of music?
That's easy. I'd be heavyweight champion of the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. On location with the dude here, Mark Corradetti at the Tsunami Cables booth, 2019 Winter NAMM Show, Anaheim, California. I'm John Liebman. You're watching for BassPlayersOnly.com.